Guys? It's your boy John the Liquidator coming back with another video. So it looked like Shedeur Sanders is currently in Las Vegas training for the 2026 season. New footage has been released. But before we get into that footage, we have to talk about the topic of the day, and that is Scrolsby. So if you guys don't know, the NFL stated that they're not doing the supplemental draft for the 2026 season. A lot of people feel like this is going to impact
Las Vegas, summer heat. A quarterback working out like he has something to prove. And he does. Because right now, Shedeur Sanders is at the center of one of the most talked about storylines in the entire NFL, and nobody fully knows how it ends. Watch this footage. This isn't a man coasting. This isn't a guy waiting for someone to hand him an opportunity. This is a guy who woke up knowing the world is watching, knowing people are doubting him, and decided to go work anyway. In Vegas heat, on turf that runs 20 degrees hotter than the air around you, in conditions where even guys who don't get tired, and he's still out there throwing. That tells you something.
The allegedly, gotta say allegedly, Shedeur Sanders trade to the Jets. Now, my thoughts about it is, I'm gonna get into my thoughts after we pull up this news. So the NFL, if you guys don't know, this right here was released a few hours ago about the Crosby thing. Now, I told y'all earlier today, we got to follow the dots and pay attention to transparency.
But before we talk about what this footage means, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, because the NFL just made a decision that sent shockwaves through social media, through Cleveland, through Jets territory, and honestly, through the entire league. The supplemental draft for 2026 has been canceled, officially off the table. And the moment that news dropped, everybody started connecting it to Shedeur, like suddenly his whole trade situation just got flipped upside down. Did it though? Did it really? Let's slow down, because people are moving fast on this and missing what's actually happening beneath the surface. Here's what we know. The Browns have been building Shedeur's trade value for weeks now, months even, long before any conversation about the supplemental draft, long before any other quarterback's name entered the Cleveland picture. Coaches were already talking. People inside that building were already saying this kid is outperforming expectations. Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, he wasn't speaking casually when he talked about Shedeur. He was specific. He said Shedeur looked light years ahead of where they expected. Light years. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't get said publicly unless someone wants people to hear it. So, ask yourself this. Why were they pumping up Shedeur's stock before training camp even started? Why were the trade rumors already circulating? None of that had anything to do with the supplemental draft situation. That conversation was already alive and moving. The dots.
I believe this is going to actually affect Shedeur going to the Jets. I believe this has nothing to do with Shedeur going to the Jets. The Browns want to get rid of Shedeur with or without Scrolsby. Before training camp, before Scrolsby even became a person, they was already raising Shedeur Sanders' trade stock because they were saying he was outperforming Watson. Todd Monken was saying
we're already being connected. And now people want to act like the supplemental draft news changed everything. It didn't. The Browns' desire to move Shedeur Sanders existed before, it exists now, and it will exist the same way after this news cycle dies down. This is a franchise with a history, a very specific, very documented history of mishandling quarterbacks, of mismanaging talent, of making decisions that leave fans and players both shaking their heads. And Shedeur, walking into that situation, had to know. His family had to know. There's a reason a father watches every single thing happening around his son's career with eyes wide open. Now, let's talk about the Jets, because that's where a lot of this speculation lands. New York, new market, a fan base that is desperate, and I mean desperate, for a franchise quarterback to believe him. The fit makes sense on paper, the energy makes sense, and sources connected to the situation have made it clear. This isn't just noise. The interest is real. The conversation is happening in rooms we don't have access to. What General Manager Joe Douglas has and hasn't said matters. What he specifically did not say, what he specifically left out, tells its own story. Rizzo, the front office decisions, the language being used, none of it has tied the supplemental draft situation to Shedeur's trade stock. None of it. That connection is being made online by people filling in gaps with guesses, and sometimes guesses become the narrative before the truth even has a chance to breathe.
Never implemented Scrolsby in any way, shape, or form about this being the reason why Shedeur Sanders possibly could be on the chopping block, possibly landing some for him. Rizzo never stated that. Guys cannot believe everything you're hearing. There is still a very high chance Shedeur Sanders will leave Cleveland with or without Scrolsby. That's what I want you guys to understand. I'm not just saying this to say this. Do I know some things? Yes, but I'm not even finna get into all that.
But let's come back to that footage, because it matters more than people are giving it credit for. Shedeur Sanders is in Las Vegas. He's training with former Colorado teammate Justin Nares. They're on a university field in summer heat that would make most people find an excuse to take a day off. And Shedeur is out there working on footwork, working on release, working on the things that don't show up in highlights but absolutely show up when training camp begins and the lights get bright. And what does he say when someone asks him about it? He says he saw no results and still woke up and chased it. That line right there, that's not something you script for a camera. That's something you say when the pressure has been real and you've been honest with yourself about what it feels like to grind without instant validation. That's the statement of someone who has been tested.
So, as you guys can see, Shedeur Sanders is in Las Vegas training, man. He's training hard. What is he training for? He's training for the chance to be a starter for the 2026 season. But just like I told y'all, I truly believe this Scoresby thing has nothing to do with Shedeur possibly getting traded. The Browns is playing a dirty game, and they have a...
Just physically, but mentally. In the public eye, under a microscope that never turns off because of who his father is and what was expected of him coming out of college. Because the expectations on Shedeur Sanders were never normal. He walked into the NFL draft as arguably one of the most discussed prospects of his generation, not just because of his play, but because of the combination of his name, his father's legacy, and the social media machine that surrounds the Sanders family at all times. Every throw he made at Colorado was analyzed. Every interception was amplified. Every great performance was followed immediately by someone reminding you that Deion Sanders was his coach, as if that somehow takes away from what Shedeur personally put on film. You know what's funny about that argument, though? Colorado wasn't a powerhouse program. They were rebuilding. Shedeur was throwing to receivers who weren't all NFL caliber, and he was still putting up numbers that made scouts lean forward in their chairs. The talent was never the question. It was never about whether this kid can play football. The questions, the real ones, have always been about fit, about what situation surrounds him, about whether Cleveland is the right place for a young quarterback who needs structure, belief, and an organization that actually builds around its offensive future, instead of cycling through quarterbacks like they're seasonal merchandise. And that's what makes this moment interesting. Because right now, in this weird in-between space, post-draft, pre-training camp, supplemental draft canceled, trade rumors still breathing, Shedeur Sanders is not sitting around waiting. He's not holding press conferences. He's not going on podcasts to complain. He's in Las Vegas, on a hot turf, throwing footballs with a former teammate who believes in him. That's the version of this story that doesn't get enough credit. If you've followed sports long enough, you know the difference between a player who handles uncertainty by making noise and a player who handles it by going to work. One of those players tends to be around a long time. The other becomes a story that gets old fast. Shedeur is clearly choosing the first path, and it's the right one. Now look, nobody can tell you with certainty what happens next. Not me, not the analysts on television, not the people on social media acting like they have insider information. Is there a trade to the Jets? Possibly. Is there a very real chance Shedeur is still wearing a Browns jersey when the regular season begins? Also possible. Right now, this is genuinely close to 50-50. What tips the scale? Mutual agreement. That's the phrase that keeps coming up from people close to this situation. Both sides. Not just the Browns deciding they want to move him, not just Shedeur's camp pushing to get out. Both sides aligning on what makes sense. And when you hear that kind of language coming from credible voices connected to this story, it tells you the conversation is further along than either party is publicly admitting. That's how these things work in the NFL. Rarely does a trade materialize out of nowhere. It builds, quietly, in meetings that don't get tweeted about, in conversations between agents and general managers that happen on phone calls nobody records. By the time it's actually announced, the groundwork has been laid for weeks.
So yes, there is a very real possibility Shedeur Sanders is not a Brown when training camp opens, and that has nothing to do with the supplemental draft. It has everything to do with a franchise trying to figure out its future, a talented young quarterback trying to position himself for success, and a father who is not going to sit quietly while his son's career gets managed poorly. Subscribe if you're following this story the right way, because we're going to keep connecting the dots as this plays out, and you don't want to miss the moment it all clicks into place. The footage from Las Vegas is a statement without words. No press conference, no drama, no clapping back at critics. Just a quarterback, a field, summer heat, and the kind of work ethic that doesn't care what the internet thinks. Whatever happens next, whether it's New York, Cleveland, or somewhere nobody's even talking about yet, Shedeur Sanders is preparing like a starter. And sometimes, that's the loudest thing a player can say. The story isn't over. It's not even close to over. We're watching something unfold in real time. And the next few weeks, they're going to tell us everything.